Do you know, and it's very interesting, that many people believe that a budget works for the organizations that they work for, but cannot work for them in their personal lives. Welcome to a word from the coach. In this week's episode of A Word from the Coach, we say a few things about budgeting, personal budgeting. The only way for you to be able to manage your money, that which you have started receiving, is that you must sit down and budget for it. And that's where today's conversation is plugging in. But before we get into it, please take a moment, if this is the first time you are here, to just subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you may continue receiving this content every time it shows up, right? Please do like this video if you like what we are talking about here. Share it with others, drop us a comment, drop your question, let me know what else you would want me to talk about, and I'll be glad to make a video and give you another word from the coach. So let's start with the basics. What is a budget? A budget is simply your spending plan. That you are sitting down and deciding that this is how I want to use my money. That is a budget. Without going into a lot of complications, a budget is simply your spending plan. In other words, you know how much is coming, and you sit down to decide that when it comes, this is how you will spend it. That is a budget. Now, the reality on the ground is that very many of us do not embrace budgeting. We do not plan for how we will spend our money. And that's why I have kept saying that many people believe it works for the organizations that they work for, but it cannot work for their own lives. And I may not blame them. Probably they have some reasons, and I'll be mentioning some of the reasons here. There are various reasons that have made people not to believe in it. But before we get into those reasons, allow me to give you some justifications as to why it is very important for you to think about planning for your expenditure before you begin to spend your money. The first thing I must mention is that your money world, your economy, is like a ship. A ship will be able to sail through deep seas, will be able to sail through plenty of water as long as it is intact, as long as it does not have leakages. You and I know that a small hole, inside your ship, if you are the captain of the ship, will begin to worry you, because that small hole will begin to bring water. That small hole begins to, cause problems. And before you know it, your ship will be sinking if you don't do anything to seal that hole. Your money world is also like this ship. If you do not know where the hole is, you will continue sailing your ship, but the hole in it will be causing you problems. Money will be slipping through that hole and disappearing from your system, and you can't see it. And your system will crash unless you are able to know where the hole is and do something to seal the hole. It is only a budget that can help you to minimize such holes in your system. Those of us who don't plan for our expenditure, we have got very many holes, and that's why after we have received money and the money is gone, we find ourselves scratching our heads, trying to ask ourselves, where did the money go? And we can't really figure out where the money went. We know that we received money, probably some good amount of money, but we don't know where the money has gone. The money is gone. Okay, because we have holes in our system, but we don't know where the holes are, and therefore we cannot seal them. It is only a budget that will help you to seal those holes so that you are completely in charge of your money story. Number two, the money that comes to you measured. None of us receives money that is not measured. Whether you are employed or you are in business, the money that comes to you measured. In which way? If you are employed, you don't receive money any day you wish or any time you wish. The money you are paid comes to you at a specific time of the month, a prearranged time, the time that your payroll has been worked on and money released. Many times, it will be once in a month or once in the agreed period. If you are employed also, you don't just receive any amount you would wish to receive. You receive a specific amount, a predetermined amount, an amount that you agreed to, and you know that this is what I am expecting every other month. So it comes to you measured in terms of time and measured in terms of amount, measured in terms of frequency. What gives us the power, the audacity to think that we can spend this that came to us measured without us measuring is what still baffles me to death. Because it comes to you measured, it is common knowledge, it is common sense, it is only logical that it also needs to go out measured. Therefore, a budget is the only thing that is coming to your life to bring the limits, the measures. You know, you're determining, I want to use this measure for rent, this measure for food, this measure for this other thing. So to the extent that it comes to you measured, you should also agree that you need to measure it as it goes out. Number 3, and the last justification for now, is that a budget will help you to be able to set and achieve your financial goals. You see, when you're budgeting, you're sitting down and telling yourself, when I receive this money, I want to use this money to accomplish this. So you are setting some goal. And therefore you will have something that you will be working with, that you will be working on. And so when the money comes, you have something guiding you on how you are pursuing the financial goals and indeed the other goals of your life that have financial implication. I hope those 3 reasons begin to entice you to realize that budgeting is very important in your personal life. But allow me to describe why some of us don't embrace budgeting. And the reasons are many, but I just want to share with us 5 of them. 5 reasons why some people don't embrace budgeting. Number 1, we have a category of people who believe that budgeting is a very complex affair. It's a complicated thing. They believe that this is something set aside for accountants. This is something set aside for people in finance, people who have a finance background, people who've gone to school to study money, to study finance, to study accounting. Allow me to tell you, as long as you know how to count money, as long as you know you are expecting to be paid 1,000 shillings, dollars, kwacha, whatever it is, and you have been paid 990 and you can complain and say this money is not complete, you have overqualified for budgeting. So budgeting is not something about going to school or having a finance or accounting background. Budgeting is you simply sitting down to say, I am expecting amount X. When it comes, I will use this portion to buy food, this portion to pay school fees, this portion to buy clothing. Basically, that is what a budget is. And that's why, for those of you who have attended my money conversations, you realize that I have not spent any time going into formats of a budget because I want to work on our mind. If the mind buys this idea, then you can budget. Figuring out a format is something you can get. You can Google it out. You just need to sit down and say, when my money comes, this is what I will use my money for. And that's it. So, if you belong to that camp, please realize that it is not a complicated affair. Number 2, we have a group of people who believe that budgeting is a disruptive process. It is coming to change their lives, their way of living. It is coming to disrupt the order that they have put in them, in their lives. You and I know that every time a new thing is introduced in our lives, the easiest thing that our human systems will do is to resist the change. So every time you want to introduce budgeting in your life, the easiest thing that your human system will do is to try and resist it, because it thinks that a budget is coming to change certain things that you are used to doing. Allow me to clarify as early as now that the role of a budget is never to disrupt your life. A budget never came to change how you live. A budget came to add limits, to introduce limits, boundaries, order into your way of living. And I have shared this example that one day in some training, I remember a guy who asked me, "Coach, I am a smoker. Do I have chance in succeeding in budgeting?" And I could clearly tell that this is someone who thinks that the first thing a budget is coming to do in his life is to order him to stop smoking. And probably he's still protective of his smoking. Even though eventually the budget might succeed, courtesy of the process I'll share shortly, might succeed in making you to stop smoking later on. But it is not the sole intention of budgeting. The work of a budget is to introduce limits. Remember, I mentioned, money that comes to you measured. Therefore, it needs to go out measured. That's the work of a budget, to measure how it goes out. So it's not meant to disrupt your life. That is why in the process of budgeting, your budget is supposed to reflect the kind of person you are, the kind of life that you're living. If you are a philanthropic person, factor your philanthropy in your budget. If you entertain yourself in a certain way, factor your kind of entertainment in your budget, and so on. Number 3, we have a category of people who believe that budgeting is a punitive exercise. It is coming to punish them. And some of them tell me, "Coach, I cannot suffer twice. I cannot suffer working hard to make money and then suffer again a second time, determining where the money will go." To them I say, if indeed it is true that you have suffered, worked hard to create the money that you very much call your hard-earned money, it is common sense that you should be willing to work even harder to protect what and dictate what this money will do. To protect and dictate what this money will do. So if you worked hard to create this money, you cannot afford to just lose it anyhow. You would want this money to do exactly what you wanted it to do. And therefore you need a budget more than anyone else. Number 4, we have a category of people who don't believe that budgeting works because of their past failures in budgeting. Probably they tried to budget at some time, at some point in their lives, but it did not work. Now, when it did not work, they did not ask themselves why it didn't work. They simply concluded that this thing does not work. This thing is theoretic. Or others have got people around them who have ever tried budgeting and not succeeded for whatever reasons, and therefore they sold their failures to them. And because of these other people's past failures in budgeting, they have also decided that this thing can't work. Therefore, I will not indulge in it. To them I say, if you tried to budget and it did not work, that does not mean that it does not work. What you simply needed to do, or what you simply need to do, is to find out why it did not work. And shortly I'll be sharing with us some simple process that will help you improve your chances of succeeding in budgeting. So that if you failed in your previous attempts, then you can minimize your chances of failing in your next attempt. So find out why it failed and try it again, because it's a concept that we cannot erase from the story of financial success. We cannot do away with it. Lastly, number 5 is a group of people who have what I call the small money syndrome. This category of people believe that the money they currently have is so small that there is no room for them to budget. In fact, they will tell me that, Coach, I will start budgeting when my money grows, when I have something. Others will be asking, do you see anything to budget here? If you've been here long enough, you know that I have some things I call realities of money. And one of the most powerful realities of money I have, there are 7 of them. And I think there are some older videos here where I taught about realities of money. I will still talk about it again in the coming days. But I have a reality that says there is no small money. But let me come to this category that think that because their money is small, according to them, then they should not be budgeting. Nothing can be further from the truth. If you believe that your money is the smallest, your money is small, your money is tiny, it's not enough, then I think you have every reason, the biggest reason under the sun, to embrace budgeting with both your hands and everything in your faculties, everything that you have. Look, between someone who has money in plenty, flowing, endlessly, and another person who thinks that their money, or who has money that is flowing in limited portions, who do you think has got the latitude to spend the way they would wish? The one who has abundant flow, or the one who has struggling flow? Definitely the one who has abundant flow can have the latitude, to spend whichever way. After all, money is not the problem. The problem is what to spend the money on. So you who is not in that category, where do you get the energy to think that, you can spend your money anyhow? If anything, then you need something that will introduce some limits so that your money can be able to do a bit more. Because with some plan, then you can be able to do a bit more than you would do if you just spent your money blindly. I hope now you have some reason, some energy to embrace budgeting. If you belong to any of those 5 categories, I have tried to demystify why those 5 categories can be misleading. But allow me, before I finish, to share with us a simple process, the process that will help you to succeed in budgeting. If you have not been budgeting, but you have been in this money world for a while, don't just rush home and begin to budget. Don't go home and say, I will start budgeting. Let me draft my budget for the next income. Chances are very high that that approach will fail, that budget will collapse ab initio, will fail from beginning. And you might be wondering why. And that's why I said there's a category of people who suffer from past failures. They tried, it didn't work. They concluded it does not work. Okay, part of the reasons why it did not work is because they rushed into drafting a budget and they forgot some things. And when the money finally came, they remembered the things they forgot. So here you have a budget that has taken care of all the money that is coming. But once the money has come, you've remembered some crucial things that you forgot. The most likely thing that you will do is to disregard this thing and just spend your money the way you've been spending, because it doesn't work. But this process that I want to share with you will help you iron out some of those issues. So if you have not been budgeting, the first thing for you to do is not to draft a budget if you want to succeed in budgeting. So allow me to share these 4 steps. Number 1, establish where your money goes. What you usually spend your money on. Track your expenditure first. Why is it necessary that you need to start by tracking your expenditure? Because when you track what you spend your money on, it will give you a realistic picture of your lifestyle. This is your day-to-day expenditure items. you will be able to know where your money usually goes. If you track how you spend your money, by the time you've tracked for 7 days, you begin to see your story coming. You begin to find yourself wondering, how come I'm spending this much money on snacks? How come I'm spending this much money on this item? You begin to have a conversation within yourself. If you can manage to track your expenditure for 30 days, it gives you a picture that is very close to your realities. And that tells you how your money story looks like. So before you start budgeting, take some time and begin to track your expenditure. How do you track your expenditure? It is very simple. And please pick a method that works for you, for your realities. Some people can use notebooks. So at the end of every day before you go to sleep, you want to note down, this is how I spent my money. I used 20 shillings for bus fare. I used this amount of money to buy snacks during, breakfast or whatever time. I spent this much money on food. I spent this much money on chewing gum. Yes, capture how you spend your money. It will shock you. Perhaps after a week or a month, you will discover that chewing gum is taking 1,000 shillings out of your monthly income. Okay? Not that it's a problem, but it will be a revelation that you can now use to succeed in budgeting. So the starting point is for you to track your expenditure. In fact, tracking your expenditure is not just a one-off affair. It is something that we just need to be doing every other day. It is very useful in budgeting because it makes your next cycle to be as closer as possible to being perfect. Some people can download apps from your respective app markets. Just look for money management apps. There are very many of them. Most of them work the same way. They have a provision for you to feed in what you have spent your money on. You can create categories and so on. That makes it easy, but you still have to remember to feed it with what you have spent your money on. So the apps are good, but they are not automatic. They will not complete or fill themselves. You still have to sit down and fill. If you've never been tracking your money, of course, it will not be very easy from the beginning. There are some days you will forget. Don't give up. Wherever you remember, just carry on from there. With time, you get used to it. I also struggled in the beginning when I started tracking my money, but today my app is up to date. You too can do it. So that's the first step. Find out what you've been spending your money on. And the reason is so that you have a realistic story before you. When you start budgeting, then you can be able to have realistic items that you usually spend your money on. But if you just rushed home and did a budget, chances are high you will forget important things. Number 2, after you have tracked your expenditure and now you know how you usually spend your money, compare your expenditure with your financial and life goals. So the first step is track your expenditure. Number 2 is compare your expenditure, the revelations you have found, compare them with your financial goals or life goals. Each one of us has got some life goals. We have some aspirations. Some of the goals maybe are written down, others are not written down. Probably you aspire that one day you will be able to have your own home. That one day you will be able to take your children to school and be able to pay school fees. That one day you will be able to drive your own car. That one day you will be able to, afford food for your family without struggle, and so on. All those might be part of your financial goals, might be part of your life goals. So now, after you have tracked your expenditure in step 1, with your findings, you now ask yourself, if I continue spending my money this way, am I moving closer to my goals or drifting far away from them? Of course, you will get an answer to that question. You just look at how you spend your money and look at the things you aspire to get in life. If the answer is no, then we are saying you begin to make some changes. So in step 2, you find out how your current expenditure behavior affects your life goals or your financial goals. If you realize it is affecting it negatively, then you make some conscious decision. You make some changes. What changes? You might choose to slow down on some of your expenditure items. You might choose to stop spending on some things. You might choose to change the frequency. Maybe you used to go partying every weekend. Now you realize, hey, I am spending a lot of money on this. Maybe you can bring it down to twice per month or once per month. Each of us will handle this based on our own reality. So this is your story, not mine. So I can't dictate that this is what you need to do, but you need to find the changes you can make. Some of the changes might be very radical, depending on how your situation looks like. So some people will stop doing some things. Some people will reduce the frequency of doing some things. Some people will reduce the amount they spend on some things, and so on. But you need to make changes that will align you, put you on the path of moving you closer to achieving your life and financial goals. Number 3, after step 2, now you can draft a budget for your next income. Chances are high now you have a realistic picture of where you usually spend your money. Now you can sit down and say, on this item, I want to spend this much. On this item, I want to spend this much. That will be more realistic than if you just left here and rushed home to do a budget. So step 3, draft your budget. Step 4, monitor and evaluate the implementation of your budget. It is one thing to draft your budget. It is one thing to decide that when my money comes, I will spend it this way and this way. That is just deciding. It's another thing to actualize what you decided, to actualize what you wrote down. So, monitor and evaluate the implementation of your budget. Monitoring entails the actual work you are doing to make sure you spend the money the way you planned. If you said, I will use this amount for food, monitoring means once the money has come, then you sit down to decide, I said I will use this for food, let me use it for food. So you are monitoring how you are doing the actual thing according to how you planned. Because the biggest temptation comes when the money has come. That's when many of us get excited. We forget we had a budget. Then once the money disappears, that's when we remember, oh, we had a budget. We had a plan. Don't fall for that temptation, right? So you need to be careful next time. So that's what monitoring is about. Evaluation will come either after a series of expenditure or at the end of it. You're coming to check the ultimate result, the ultimate product of what you've been doing. You are asking yourself, how has my actual spending compared with my plan? How do they compare? Okay, I had planned to spend this way. Have I done so? So you are counter-checking how you have spent the money. And where there are discrepancies, you are explaining. I planned to spend this much money on fuel. I spent more. Why? Probably prices went up. Probably you went on a driving spree. So that will help you when you're making the next budget. You can tell yourself, maybe this month I might need to slow down on this. But that's what evaluation is all about. At the end of the budgeting season, you have budgeted, you have spent the money. You now come back to just check. I wanted to spend this way. Did I? Yes or no? And where it is a no, what is the reason? And it doesn't mean that a no will always be in bad light. Probably you planned to spend X amount on something and you in reality have spent less. So there has to be an explanation. Maybe you did not indulge much in that thing. But just tell yourself, I know the explanation for this is this and this. That's what evaluation is all about. The reason we are evaluating is so that we improve our budgeting game for the next season. So that's why it's very important. So please, I hope I have said something that will make your next budgeting journey look better. Once again, please subscribe to this channel. Share it with your friends. If you love this video, if you love what you've heard, please drop me a like, drop a comment here, drop your question here. I'll be glad to do another word from the coach to respond to such comments and such questions. So I hope to meet you in the next word from the coach as we talk about another interesting thing. If you have something else you would want me to talk about, like I've said, drop it in the comment section or inbox me on our various inbox platforms, either here or through our contact, which is available on all our platforms, so that then I can be able to give it attention. Thank you so much. You can do better.